My name's Dana Zuber, and I work for Wells Fargo. I run our big data analytics team within our newly hired Chief Data Officers group, and I am here to talk to you about what it's like being on a team, managing a team at a really big company like Wells Fargo. You know, we don't have a foosball table anywhere that I'm aware of in in all of our many offices. We don't offer free food to our employees in an awesome cafeteria every lunch. And you know, we're not Facebook, we're not Netflix, we're not LinkedIn, we're not Twitter, we're not Google. Heck, our logo is a stagecoach, which is pretty much, you know, the opposite of high tech. So you know, how can we do it? And I think we're doing a pretty good job. I'm located in the Bay Area, by the way, so I'm, of course, having to compete with all of those companies. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the journey we've been on for the past year and a half since we started our team. So first of all, I'm going to talk about how things have changed since I entered the space, you know, 15, 20 years ago, who this data scientist is that everyone's talking about, how we like to play analytics as a team sport, some other challenges we have, and then kind of, I think, some really neat stuff that we're doing at Wells Fargo around building an analytics community at the bank. So let's start off with, you know, we're not in Kansas anymore. I think really, when, you know, it used to be like a relay race, and I don't know if any of you are, you know, if you were kind of 35 or over, maybe you can relate to this. You know, back when I started doing this, this is kind of what the analytical process looked like. I don't know if you guys can relate to it. It wasn't a loop. It wasn't iterative. It was kind of a straight line, right? And just to give you an example, what would happen is you'd have a problem that you wanted to solve, and you'd think about the data you wanted, and not if this sounds familiar to you, you'd fill out a form, and it would go off into the ether somewhere, and someone whose name you didn't know, and certainly who you'd never met before, would fulfill your request, and in a day or 2 days, or maybe a couple weeks later, you'd get your data. And then you'd finally get around to doing the analysis. Yay, except oh shoot, I forgot to add that column in. So then you'd have to resubmit your form, and maybe the same person would respond to it, but more than likely not. And then a couple days or, you know, a month later, you'd get the data, and then, you know, maybe your analysis would get done. So it was very much like a relay race. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, but that's kind of what it was like for me, at least 10 years ago. Now it kind of looks more like this, I think. It's more of a circle. It's more iterative. You know, you've got this team, and you're asking questions together. You're doing the data discovery together. You're doing the analysis together. So this time when you go, oh, I forgot that column of data, you can just go get it yourself, more than likely, right? You communicate your results. You hopefully have found something that you can turn into action and derive value from, and then you ask another question. And that's really called analytics. So in some ways, it's changed, but it's still the same. So this is what it used to look like, right? SAS, SPSS, MATLAB, and most of us were using Excel. In fact, you were kind of the hot guy on the floor, or the hot gal on the floor, if you could do, you know, VLOOKUPs and knew a little bit of Visual Basic, right? That's all you used. And, you know, honestly, if I was applying for a job now, doing what I did 15 years ago, I don't think I'm remotely qualified. You know, we have a funny term on my team about pig Latin and all the crazy languages that you got to speak these days. You know, definitely Excel is still very prominent, although I will say that my team hardly uses it. And definitely we've got a ton of SAS users at the bank, but there's a lot of other both programming and non-programming tools that are kind of expected now. In fact, I'd say that the last job description I saw with Excel written on it for an analyst was maybe about 5 years ago. I don't know if you guys are noticing the same thing or not. So it's really changed. The toolkit is a lot broader and a lot deeper. So here comes the data scientist. I first heard this term 2 years ago, I think, about 2 years ago or so. And this guy or gal is pretty awesome because they can do all this cool stuff. So this is the first definition of a data scientist. They can hack, they've got the math, they've got the statistics, and they've got that business expertise. But of course, someone looked at that and said, we're missing something. So then this became the next definition, which added to the prior some computer science and engineering. Unfortunately, Hillary forgot the business piece. So then this was the next definition we saw, which is awesome because it adds creativity, which of course is incredibly important for this person, and critical is communication. Because, I mean, you've got to be a PhD in mathematics, you have to have amazing business knowledge, you need to be one of the best computer programmers in the Bay, and you got to be able to communicate. I mean, please. So this is my new version. And I'm thinking of getting a patent out on it because I really think this covers everything that this data scientist is going to do. I mean, this is it. This is my job description. Except the only problem, of course, as you can probably tell here, is that, you know, by and large, at least for a company like Wells Fargo, doesn't exist, I don't think. Now, I've heard this actually a few times at the conference, so hopefully this is repetition to everybody. I think by now most people realize this. Maybe Twitter and Facebook and Google can find these folks, but you know, we certainly can't, and truth be told, I don't really want them because this is what we do at Wells Fargo, or at least on my team. Obviously, if I'm quite tall, 6 feet, so I'm going to use basketball as my analogy, but you could throw in any sport you wanted. You know, everyone on the court knows how to play ball, but you know, the job of the coach is to figure out what I'm good at and what my teammates are good at, and then build plays around those strengths, right? That's how you win at any sport. And I like to think that analytics is kind of the same. We all know analytics, we all get that circle, but we all have our strengths. And as a manager, your job is to figure out what those strengths are and then really leverage them. So the question becomes, you know, how do you do it? Everyone wants to play on the dream team. Everyone wants to coach the dream team, of course, because dream teams win. So how do you do it? And this is how we do it at Wells Fargo. Has anyone ever heard of Strength Finders before? Oh, cool. So you guys know your top 5? If I asked you, I won't, but yeah? Did you have your spouses do it after you did it, is my question, because I did. So for those of you who don't know, Strength Finders is terrific, and I mean, you guys should just go buy the book and do the survey. It's awesome. It basically asks you a whole bunch of questions, and at the end, you get 5 strengths. And by the way, if you go back 15 years later and redo it because you really want that other strength that didn't show up, you can't fool the system. I've tried twice, and I still have the same 5. And the point with Strength Finders, and I'm so proud to work for a company that really does walk the talk, because it's the first thing a new employee at Wells Fargo does, and it's really part of our culture. And the point is that if you have ever worked for a company that focused on what they like to call opportunities for improvement, and you really focus on those opportunities for improvement, that's the blue line, right? We're all super smart, and let's take something I'd be horrible at, learning to program in R, as Evelyn in the audience knows. I could probably learn it if I spent a lot of time on it. But I'd never get to be very good, and I'd plateau pretty quickly, and I'd probably quit before that plateau happened. However, if instead I have something I'm sort of naturally good at, you know, the return is practically exponential. So the point here is to imagine a team where you've identified every single strength of your team, and now you can kind of stack it according to those strengths, right? So the point is that I'm never going to find someone that can do every single thing like an expert, but if you find 5 people that have 5 different skills in which they're an expert and you put them together, then suddenly you've got a team that's going to expertly play every single position every single time, no matter what the project is. And I'm speeding through this really quickly, so we're going to be out of here pretty soon, guys. I hope that's okay. I like to think of it like a tap of water that you can turn up and down. And if you stack your team this way, the really cool part is you can pretty much take on any project you want. So as an example, this is not how my team is built, but imagine you've got four girls on your team, 4 women on your team. You've got someone with an MBA background, you've got an awesome programmer, you've got the data dude, well, in this case, dudette, and someone with a PhD in statistics, okay? And if you imagine all the steps along that analytical process, clarifying the need, doing the data discovery, designing and doing the analytics, communicating the results, my team never really gets into production, so I have excluded that from this chart. And imagine you've got, I don't know, 4 different projects. You've got 2 strategy projects. Maybe one is about a customer segmentation type scheme. Maybe another is, I don't know, some sort of churn analysis. And then you've got a heavy stats project. I mean, maybe you want to do some really complicated uplift modeling. And then lastly, someone's just come to you, knocked on your door and said, hey, I want you to do some, I don't know, text analysis that involves, natural language processing for me. I want you to comb through my emails and be able to predict X, Y, or Z. Well, if you have a team with a bunch of so-called data scientists that are okay in all those skills, you probably aren't really going to be able to deliver those 4 projects successfully. However, if you've got someone who can pull the data, for example, you can pair them up with the rest of your team. For example, you can have him paired up with your MBA rock star, who's maybe working a lot in Tableau. And then when that project's done, your data guy can go and help the statistician so that your statistician isn't wasting all of her time pulling data. Does that make sense to you guys? That's what we'd like to do. Now, of course, the trick is, I don't think most people would like to be referred to as the data guy forever. So you've got to make sure that you're giving your folks opportunities to learn new things and expand their horizons and really take ownerships of all the projects, or I don't think your data guy would stick around for very long. The thing is, he or she is the most critical, in my opinion, because they are the ones who really understand the data, know where to get it, know where all the skeletons are hidden, and are pretty much creating the foundation upon which all the projects are going to be built. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with our team, and in fact, we've just hired I'm really excited. We've got a semantic learning expert coming on board in a couple weeks, and I'll put a plug in now for those of you that haven't already heard me. We have one other opening at the moment, although more to come, for a data artist. We're looking for a Tableau guru who can really work on all of our projects and help us figure out how to communicate them. Because that's a place right now where we're falling a little bit short, I would say, particularly in some of our really complex analytics. So we want to hire an expert in who can help us do that. Here's a couple other challenges that I've experienced at Wells Fargo, and actually I think these transcend any company. I don't care if they have foosball in the lobby. Obviously, there's a huge shortage in these skills, right? I think Evelyn's in the audience here. I think we interviewed like 30, well, we certainly conducted 30 to 40 interviews to find one person. It's pretty crazy. So I think it becomes my responsibility to start training our internal talent. It kind of breaks my heart that we're looking outside the company so much for these folks, because I think that if we just invested a little bit in the right training, we could take some pretty smart people and kind of just build their skills up a little bit so they could kind of become this data scientist. One thing that we have done at Wells Fargo is we have invested in some technology that I think democratizes this a little bit. So we've got a wonderful appliance called Aster, which is actually not a Microsoft product. It's a Teradata product. And it allows someone with some really great SQL under their belt to take a 3-day course and then be up and running in sort of the big data analytics realm. So I think we need to do more of that, and we need to do a better job of that, certainly at Wells Fargo. The other thing that is a problem, no matter how big your data is that you really still have to understand the business. The only problem is that when you're dealing with shiny new objects, you kind of tend to let them take priority over the business problem. And you gotta always remember, tack it up to your wall that you, at the end of the day, you're not there to play with shiny new objects. You are there to solve business problems. So I've just noticed that it becomes a little easier to do that when we're on the cutting edge of some of this technology. This probably applies more for big companies than anyone else, particularly big companies that are in a heavy regulated industries. A lot of the vendors that come knocking at our door, they're just not quite ready for prime time, at least not by my definition working in a heavily regulated industry that is in charge of people's financial security. So a lot of these vendors come in and they talk this wonderful game, and I'm so excited to try that thing. And then they turn to their customer page, and all of their customers are like less than a year old. I kind of say, well, come back and talk to me in a few years, because I don't even know if you're still going to be in business next month. So that's one experience that I think at least I'm finding at Wells. And then lastly, at the end of the day, and I think we've heard this a few times, who's making the decisions? It sure ain't the computer. I'll tell you right now, it's not my laptop. I hope not. I've dropped that thing enough times. I don't know that I would trust any decision that came out of it. So it really does become a lot about the communication and telling a story so that a decision maker can actually make a decision on the data and the analysis. And this is my last slide, so we're going to get out of here early. We've been doing a lot of work on building a community of practice at Wells Fargo, and this is probably the thing that I'm most excited about with respect to my job. Our goal is to build a community. We've got 260 team members, 260,000 team members at Wells Fargo, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of analysts. And we want to leverage all of them. As I said before, a whole lot of them are probably both very capable and very interested of taking on the sort of data scientist role. So our goal is, as part of becoming a company, a bank that competes on analytics, our goal is to do a couple of things in that regard. Number one, we've got an Analytics Leadership Council. I actually was talking to somebody about some similar stuff that you're doing at Duke Energy. So I'm glad to hear that for once, Wells Fargo is at the head of the pack when it comes to some of these things. That's a cross-enterprise group of about 20 leaders at the bank. And they help us determine things like what are we really great at and what do we kind of suck at. So for example, some of the things that we're trying to do better under their direction is the training aspect, the recruiting aspect. And when I say recruiting from their perspective, it's more that pipeline of talent at the bottom. You know, they say that millennials are, well, we all know how important millennials are, but my guess is they're probably a little bit underrepresented on some of our analytics teams. And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is reaching out to schools and universities. There's a lot of great analytics programs popping up these days, and bringing some of those folks in for internships and full-time, you know, not beginner, but anyway, starter employment opportunities at Wells Fargo. We have a website which we launched, I don't know, I think in January, using Jive. The idea is it's kind of like Facebook for the enterprise. And the goal of that is to actually reach out to anyone who wants to learn more about analytics, anyone who wants to collaborate. I'm a huge Tableau user at Wells Fargo, and I've actually saved myself a lot of time, for example, by just posting things like, hey, does anyone know how to do X, Y, or Z in Tableau? And sure, I could spend a whole lot of time researching on Google. And what I found is that people are actually really excited to say, oh my gosh, Dana, yes, I know how. And here you go. Here's how to do it. Click on this link and it'll show you how. And then lastly, we've got a couple of initiatives going on. We have a big data innovation hub. As I mentioned, we're spending a lot of time thinking about recruiting. We're also looking at our humongous roster of online courses that we have in our Learning Development Center and creating a curriculum around analytics, and then identifying the gaps that we need to fill so we can start training some of our own folks. And then, of course, analytic talent management. One of the things that happens when you work for a big company is silos. So people move a lot within their lines of business, but they don't cross lines of business very often. And we think that especially in analytics, that's really critical. So we're trying to change the mentality there so we have more talent sharing between our lines of businesses. And I think that might be it. Any questions? I can take this microphone off. Any questions at all? Oh, okay. I almost feel like, yeah, you want to guess. So communicator, competition, activator. That's the one I denied for a really long time because I wanted to be strategic, but it turns out I'm not. I'm an activator. Wooer, that's right. Woo and maximizer. I'm that annoying person that like has to make every PowerPoint slide absolutely perfect. I think that's the maximizer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you and I, we would make a great team, right? At least that's the concept of Strength Finders. Yeah, you know, I look at that, so some people could look at that and say, oh God, I gotta find another team. I look at it as like, hey guys, I'm the only woo and communicator here. You better be nice to me. Yes, sir. So the big joke in our family is, because my husband's got strategic, is I one day went out and I was like, Rob, we need a garden. So he's like, okay, and he made a garden. Or I think I did it. And then like 2 days later, I'm like, actually, you know what? We need a patio. So then he had to ruin the garden carrying up all the patio stones. And he was strategic, of course, and I'm just like, I just do it. And sometimes I don't think as much as I should, probably. Any other thoughts or questions? I mean, does this resonate with you guys? It kind of seems like old news now. I mean, I think pretty much everyone's sort of been there, done that on the data scientist. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have brought up a good point. I don't think I mentioned a single Microsoft product except Excel in this talk, did I? Sorry, guys. Anyway, anything else? Uh-huh. Yeah, actually, so I didn't even talk about that. Well, okay, so we aren't there yet, but our goal, look, we've got 88 lines of business, Evelyn? I can't remember okay. And within each of those 88 lines of business, we have more sub-businesses than you can count on, all of our hands and toes. Every single one of those has an analytics team. And for those teams, 80% of what they do, they can do using Excel and Tableau, and they don't need to program, or they've got the data to answer those questions. What we're trying to do is actually help them with that 20% that they can't do. And so we're trying to give them an alternative to going out and hiring McKinsey every time they have a complex, oh, you're a consultant, aren't you? So we're actually competing with you probably ultimately, to give them an alternative. And also, of course, to help them learn, right? I mean, we want, if they want to use Aster, we're like, go to it, it's right there. You just gotta take the course and get some practice doing it. And so that will be quite a bit different because Wells Fargo doesn't traditionally have a centralized model for anything, but the approach I think is the same. And I was at your presentation earlier and was agreeing with you wholeheartedly that you can't give, I don't even care if it's the CEO of Wells Fargo, and in his case a PowerPoint deck, but an analysis without giving him the so what and what the recommendation is. So we will continue to do that. It involves a lot of socialization. At a big company, we probably spend, I don't know, after we've spent the 80% of our time on the analysis pulling the data and the 10% doing the PowerPoint, so we've really only spent 10% of the time on the analysis. Now we take all that and double it and call that socialization, and a year later, we might actually have have an initiative started. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, keeping in mind that my focus is purely on the analytics versus the operational. I don't know, Evelyn, is it fair to say we don't really ever talk business requirements? It's more about those questions. In fact, what was really resonating with me today was when the keynote speaker this morning, did you guys notice every single viz he put up, he started with a question? And so I think it really is about, you got to sit down with them and really hash through it. So I guess the strategy is just spend like twice, 5 times, 10 times the amount of time doing that than you think you need to, and don't be afraid. And that conversation should really not be focused at all on the tool or the approach or the methodology. It should be really about what is the business problem you're trying to solve. What are you going to do with this? If I'll tell you this, one thing that I think works is if the conversation starts out with, wouldn't it be interesting, then you probably don't want to go there. I don't know if that helped. Well, so as we're building out our entire, and it's not my team alone, but we have this group under the new Chief Data Officer called Enterprise Data and Analytics, and one of them is that big data innovation hub I mentioned. They're really trying hard to get involved as early as possible. And I mean, I think that's the key. And in fact, we have actually said no to 2 projects, which, when you're me and you're building out a team and you've got all this budget, you kind of got to start spending. I mean, you don't want to say no to projects, but a couple of them, we've arrived too late in the process. So we've said no. And I mean, I think that would be my advice, is just get involved as soon as you can. So, I mean, maybe a good thing to do is for me to take off this microphone, and if everyone wants to exchange contact information or LinkedIn information, I don't want to keep anyone that's itching to get out of here just because we're having this side discussion. But any big questions, and then, anything else? All right, so thanks for coming to the very last session in this humongo auditorium. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Good luck getting home.